Hi everyone, my name is Varun Chandak. I'm a second year student at the Rotman School of Management in the full-time MBA program. I'm here today with Tanya, who is the Director of Accessibility Services at UofT. This webinar today is brought to you by Access to Success, one of the newest student-run initiatives at Rotman, which works together with all students here to ensure a level playing field for students with disabilities and promote a conversation around accessibility related issues. So in today's webinar, I will talk to Tanya about what Accessibility Services does and how you can benefit from the services provided by them, maybe answer a few questions that some of you have sent me, and take it from there. So Tanya Davis has been with UofT for the last 8 years, and she's been in the same role as the Director of Accessibility Services. Before starting at Rotman, she was at Ryerson in a similar position. So what do you, Tanya, can you tell us something about accessibility services?
Sure, thank you for inviting me. It's really great to have an opportunity to talk about accessibility services and what we offer in ways that incoming students may hear. Accessibility services assist students with disabilities with academic accommodations. So the process involves submitting some medical documentation to our office and a registration package that's on our website. And then we look at that package and we meet with the student and help figure out the accommodations that might help assist them in their studies. Some of the things that are common accommodations, particularly for the MBA program, would be things like extra time for tests and exams. It might be extensions on assignments, or the volunteer note-taking program to assist students in remembering what was said in the classroom. So those are some of the things.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive, very good summary of what accessibility services does. Let's dive in a little bit into the details. So you mentioned that the incoming students first register for accessibility services. How does that happen, and when should they do it?
If they can come as soon as possible, it would be really great, because the exam deadline in December for registering for exams comes November the 10th. So it's difficult to get exam accommodations beyond that date. And then of course we need to meet students and help them register before that November 10th date. So as soon as you're on campus, be in touch with our office. And if you go to the website, if you Google Accessibility Services UofT St. George, the registration packages are there, and you just download them and fill them out. And then have a medical professional complete the medical forms, and either fax them, email them, or bring them into our office. And then we set up an appointment to meet students.
So there might be some international students who have arrived in Canada and then learned of accessibility services, maybe even today. So for them, how would it work? As in, you mentioned that they would need to get some form filled out by a medical practitioner. So how would it work for them?
I think they may have documentation of a disability from when they were younger. So anything they have from previous schooling can be helpful. Health and Wellness in the Koffler Student Center often completes the documentation for students, particularly for international students, because they won't have a practitioner in Canada necessarily, right? Yeah.
Okay.
And I think for international students, the whole sense of what is accessibility services and why would I come and what's available may be a new concept, because disability is understood differently in different cultures. So the thought of declaring a disability in an MBA program may be a kind of new idea. And my sense, given the guidelines in Canadian law around supporting people with disabilities to be successful, is that you would come because the accommodations may really help you in your academic work, right? And we're always balancing the kind of accommodations for somebody with the standards of the program. So we're finding solutions for what people might need within the same standards that other students need.
So you mentioned that disability is understood differently in different cultures. So from a Canadian perspective, from a UofT perspective, what does it mean to have a disability? Who is eligible to take the benefits provided by accessibility services?
Okay. So we often think of people with disabilities as a sensory or physical disability. And in fact, the vast majority of the students registered in our office have invisible disabilities. Some of those are things like learning disabilities or ADHD, or head injuries is becoming a growing area, or students on the autism spectrum. And those are differences in how students process information, how they organize information. And so often things like additional time can be very helpful for those students. There's also students on campus living with every illness imaginable, every chronic health issue. And we also have students, about 47% of the students registered in our office are living with a mental health issue. Some of that is ongoing anxiety and depression, and some of it is more long-standing mental health issues that will be with people for the rest of their lives. So under Canadian law, disability is defined as a functional limitation. So it's that, is there an ongoing functional difference in how someone works and does academic work that affects their academic progress? So that can, and it can be something straightforward like, I broke my arm before midterms, how am I going to write my exams? And then we have a scribe or voice activated technology, or give students additional time. So it can be a functional limitation that is straightforward that will heal eventually, or it might be something more long-standing that's with people for life.
Thank you, that's very, very helpful. This certainly covers the various aspects of disability that any person may have. But sometimes in my conversations with students, there are situations where the student may not even be sure if what they have would classify as a disability and accommodation. So what should such students do?
I think there is, under the learning disabilities package, it's really a series of questions around how you learn and how you study. So if you're not sure what to do, that's a very good registration package to look at. And then we meet with students, get a better sense of how education has gone in the past, how they've worked in the past, and then help them figure out, right, what the best recourse is, what other resources might help if we're not the best place, but we can be the connector to other resources on campus.
So that's amazing. Even if you're not sure of whether you have a disability or not, if you think you may, but you just don't know, you've never got diagnosed with a disability, but you feel you do, just reach out to accessibility services. They are happy to help and they'll get you there. Even if you need any sort of accommodation, I'm sure Tanya and her team will be happy to help.
There is a story. There was an international student who is in engineering and really struggling. And he Googled extra time on the UofT website, found our office, came in, filled out this registration package for learning. And turns out he had quite a significant learning disability. But the way that he'd been educated in the past, it looked like tutoring from his mom, right? So he didn't understand that there was a thing called a learning disability. It was just the way he had worked in the world, and his mom had been there to help when he needed it, right? And so when he came to Canada, the system's different, and so what we were able to do is different. But it's that every culture has a way of coping with functional differences, and the trick is, how do you do it in Canada?
Okay, that does make sense. We're in Canada, so if it fits the Canadian definition, you're good to go. So you briefly touched upon what kind of accommodations are available in the beginning, but could you expand on that a little bit, say on the autism spectrum or OCD or ADHD or physical disabilities? What sort of accommodations could be provided to students?
Okay, so I think often people need additional time. There may be things that they need around interactions in the classroom or in groups. So if a student's on the autism spectrum, often if the professor learns a little bit around how students with autism function best, it can be helpful for that social interaction in the classroom and what's expected. So knowing the rules and the structures can be really helpful for students. Also, I think there's just a lot of problem solving. This is my disability. I'm stuck on this issue around my academic work. I don't know what to do, and can I come in and talk to you about it, and we may be able to work out some strategies. So it's not like you come in and there's a checklist and you're good to go. We often need to work with students over time to find out what the best mix of accommodations is. And there's also other support, so we can be a source of funding for things like coaching and tutoring. Or there may be adaptive technology, there may be software that can help students with study skills. Or sometimes people need a really light laptop because of their chronic health issue. So there's a number of ways that we can help. We also have an adaptive technologist working for us who teaches people software that can be helpful. And we have learning strategists, because if learning isn't going to be easy, if reading and writing are difficult tasks, then what's the most effective way to get through the material and produce the assignments you need to produce? Often people are very strong verbally, so they can really succeed in business through their social skills and their verbal skills, but the written can be a little more difficult.
Is there a cost involved to these accommodations and benefits?
We will look for funding for the things like tutoring and coaching, where it's ongoing work with people where it would be done privately and there are costs. But we are a source of funds. There's a fund in grad studies that we can apply to. The Ontario government provides quite a big bursary, and often the program will fund expenses where we need it.
So there are certain accommodations for which the students will have to pay the cost?
Well, if a student is meeting weekly with a tutor or a coach, there are costs associated with that. And the question is, if they're required for academic success, how do we figure out how they're paid for? And there are bursaries and grants in the institution that can assist students with that.
How about the adaptive technologies?
They would be similar because they're required for academic success. So the question is, what's the pot of money that we can tap to help students get the technology they need?
I see. So the next thing is that some students, especially maybe some students coming from other countries, might be concerned a little bit about the privacy aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Who this information will be shared with, whether their peers and classmates will come to know of it, will the professors come to know of it, will the career center come to know of it, and what would be the impact?
Okay, so one of the reasons to register with accessibility is that we keep your medical and personal information confidential. It's stored confidentially. And under Ontario law, there's something called FIPA, the Freedom of Privacy and Protection of Information Act. And under that act, we only share the information that someone needs to know. So if a professor needs to make an announcement in a classroom for a volunteer note taker, or grant an extension, or send a test to the test exam center, they need to know that you need that. But they don't need to know the accommodations you receive at tests and exams. So the professor would know to send the test, but we'd only tell tests and exams what your accommodations are for writing a test. So information is shared on a need-to-know basis so someone can do the job of accommodating a student. But more information isn't shared. And even within the office, we don't share information unless there's a decision that has to be made and information needs to be given for that decision. So we're very conscious all the time of people's confidentiality and the sensitivity of the information that we receive from students. And it's once you're registered with accessibility, we've said you have a disability, people across the campus accept that because we're a little rigorous. People say you're hard to get into, and it's part of that rigor of ascertaining whether there's a disability and it requires accommodation. Once we've done that, then the university says, okay, well, we'll be part of the accommodations process.
That's very good to know. Switching topics just a little bit, there might be situations like you mentioned briefly in the beginning that just very close to the examination period, a student might realize that he or she needs an accommodation. So, in such emergency scenarios where there's a very short notice, what can be done?
Okay, so we have had unprecedented growth in the last 5 years. I think it's a 65% increase in students. And so we've undergone a program review in the last year to try and speed things up. So we're developing an in-term accommodation process that we can use so that when the registration packages pile up, we can quickly go through, meet with students, and do a small amount of accommodation. So there might be a little bit of additional time or extensions, and based on what people would have submitted, we would provide those accommodations and then work with them more extensively at a later time.
So when do you think these new changes will take place? Because my next question was actually going to be about some of our existing students who mentioned about a little bit longer waiting times at accessibility services. So you touched upon that just now. So when do you think these new changes will take place?
Well, they're going into place now. So we've been implementing the program review since the spring, and we're hoping it will strengthen the administrative side and the intake side. So there's a new person being hired to be an intake coordinator to do this triage work with students, to do whatever we can quickly. And there's already a triage process that's been developed for that pre-exam period that we'll use. And people's calendars are blocked, so they'll have time to do it.
Okay, that's great to know. So do you have any advice in for incoming students and current students at the Rotman full-time MBA program?
I would come to accessibility services as soon as you can. Often people think, well, I'll try it out and see how it goes and then I'll come. And that's often when it's too late. So sometimes people register and it's up to you whether you use your accommodations or not. So there's a letter of accommodations that you give to your professors or to your program. But if you don't give them the letter, you won't receive accommodation. So students have a lot of choice. So I would come soon. Get yourself registered, and then if you need us, fine, and if you don't need us, it's there if you do. That would be my sense of it.
Thank you. So folks, there you have it. If you think you might need an accommodation in the future, even if you don't now, this is the time to go. Believe me, I've been where you are, and it's going to get really hectic in the coming year. So if you have time right now, register with accessibility services, get the letter of accommodation. If you have any further queries that weren't touched upon today, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Varun Chandak, or email us at accesstosuccess@rotman.utoronto.ca. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.